Chaksurun Vinitam Yanatashmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutare Swayam Rupa Karamayam Darati Swaparantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Taparakamalam Sri Guru Vaishnavam Sri Rupam Sagaritam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Stam Sadevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitam Stam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinu Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Narayanam Namaskritam Naram Cheva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Tato Jayodhira Neshta Prayashu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatiyamashoki Bhaktir Bhavati Naistaki Nigama Kapadurgaritam Param Shukamakaramita Dravisamitam Pibata Bhagatam Rashamariu Mahora Horisikabavan Krishna Swadama Pagade Damagari Karonashta Dushamasha Pananakodinodidam Tamapiyadabhishuta Pishatam Vivu Samapyadana Bidam Biduksaram Prakyahiduhur Mahoradiram Sankleshan Hirvanum Usanti Nanyadam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutare Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Dhanamane Namaste Sarasati Devi Gauravani Pachari Nirvishesa Sanivadi Praskada Desarani Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Good morning. Welcome, Brent. Good morning, John, Malik on Facebook, Rob on Zoom. Picking up from where we left off last Wednesday, we said that according to a Bengali statement, a Bengali proverb, too much of anything is too much. This is called pratyahara, or over endeavor in the nectar of instruction. Gajendra is married, Gajendra has wives, Gajendra has kids. But there's too much attachment to the wives and the kids. Wives and kids are not bad in themselves. There's a tremendous potential for good. There's opportunities for Krishna consciousness there. But too much attachment, excessive attachment, working hard to the expense of spiritual life, taking one's family as all in all is too much. It's too much. One has to work with detachment. Though someone can say, well, I can get married, I can have a wife, I can have kids, I can have business, I can have land, I can expand my activities, and then I can take some of those results and offer them to Krishna. That's okay. But how often with that good intention in mind does one then get overly attached, overly absorbed, and work extra hours foaming at the mouth in order to get the wealth, which purportedly is supposed to go to Krishna, but some or other never ends up getting there. Some or other one has to reinvest one's money in order to get more and more profit. And some or other one doesn't have time anymore to go to the temple or to chant one's rounds. This is all in the name of making a detour and going away and around, and then some or other getting back to Krishna. But we have to remember, Maya is pretty clever. She's been doing what she does for a long time. So if you get off the track, if you take the exit, there's a good chance that Maya will make such arrangements, complicate things sufficiently that you'll never get back on the track again. We've seen that happen over and over and over and over and over again. In fact, even in a mundane way, I read that most of history's tyrants like Hitler, Stalin, Pol Pot in Cambodia were actually in their youth idealists. They had empathy for the fallen, downtrodden state of the people. They had ideas, they had energy, they had influence, they had charisma. And in the initial stages of their careers, they actually brought about revolutionary changes, improvements in the lifestyle of people. Take Hitler, for instance. After World War I, Germany was devastated. So he brought the economy back. He gave the people a sense of self-respect. He increased their income. He rebuilt the country after the devastation of World War I. So at least his motives initially were all right, laudable. But yet he came to a point where he thought that unless he was in charge, things would not continue to improve. And so then he started to do away with the competition. He started to get lightheaded, proud, and arrogant, thinking that he is God's gift to the world. And one atrocity led to another, to another, to another, to another. And practically every major culprit, tyrant, despot in history who was responsible for killing hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of their countrymen, actually started out as an idealist. So similarly, how many people think, well, I'll get this wife and then I'll make some money and then I'll give liberally to Krishna? Not to confuse him with materialists or despots or anything like that, but even Prabhupada, he hadn't met his spiritual master until 1926, and he was already married then. He was already in the middle of a family, and he couldn't just leave his family and go to America. And so he had a similar type of a plan. He would diligently pursue his career in the pharmaceutical business. He, in fact, started his own business. And his idea was to make a small fortune, put it aside, and then use it for preaching once his children were grown. And Krishna had other plans. He went to America, in fact, with only $7, but he was nevertheless successful. That was Krishna's ways of doing things. But if you have the right wife, if you have a Krishna conscious wife, then that same tendency to expand one's influence, to have children, to have land, to have businesses, it can be directly dovetailed in the service of Krishna. One needn't do something indirectly. Oftentimes, young people, upcoming generations in Krishna conscious, feel they have to go to college for 4 years, get their degree and get their graduate degree, and then lock themselves into a career. They have to go to massage therapy, or they have to become an insurance salesman, and then they will give the results to Krishna. But if it's good to indirectly serve Krishna in a roundabout way, it's certainly better, I think you'll agree, to serve Krishna directly, if you're willing to make that your priority, if you really recognize that's the main goal of life. So what's the best asset? What's the best tool that one can have in order not to get deviated, not to get distracted? Well, the same gender, the fair sex, which is most often the excuse, and I'm not saying women are the cause, but they're often the excuse the man gives as to why he can't prosecute Krishna conscious right now, but it's going to happen somewhere, sometime down the road. The excuse he's going to give is the woman. That same woman, if she's Krishna conscious, that same principle of Stri, the woman being the inspiration behind the man, expanding the family, expanding the land, expanding the house, expanding the businesses, that same woman, if she's Krishna conscious, she can be the catalyst for expanding direct devotional service to Krishna. I have that own experience in Bhai Bhabhi. Bhai Bhabhi is not a materialistic. She doesn't want land, house, children, businesses for her own sense gratification. She's a dedicated, sincere devotee of the Lord. We look at our Salt Lake City temple, and there are many women who are taking their husband to a higher level than he would be able to achieve were he on his own. There is Amrita Sundari, for instance. She gives amazing Bhagavatam classes. She has a deep understanding of philosophy. And she does a Sunday school every Saturday, which is very, very popular. Not only do the kids want to come to the temple to attend her Sunday school class, but many of the parents accompany the kids for the same reason. So here's a lady who, and her children, Divyam, and especially Krishna, as well as her husband, Ras Vilas, are pulled up by the bar that she sets. And when Amrita Sundari is not available to do the Sunday class, then Shwati, Umesh Novel's wife, she stands in. She also sets a high standard so that Umesh and his children do more in Krishna conscious, in direct Krishna conscious, than they would have done had his wife been less of a devotee. Sundari Priya is virtually the temple president up there. She preaches so nicely to people. She greets them warmly with a smile, welcome. She finds out details about their life. She shows a genuine interest in the lives of people who come. She doesn't discriminate between Indians and Westerners. She's very democratic. And she engages people in service. She takes care of everything on the ground up there in Salt Lake City. Now, there's 3 examples of women, and I'm sure there are others also that are not coming to mind right at the moment. But this is an example. It says, the very things which can cause our bondage and attachment, which is excessive affection for women and wife and family, those very things can also become the springboard by which we advance in Krishna consciousness. Rishabdev, in the 5th canto, gives advice to his 100 sons, and it's presumed that his sons are mostly going to get married. He says, Nayam dehade dajan biroke kashtan kamana divibada tibovyaram sudyanti tajmai pravishnavena. He advises his sons. He's retiring, and he's giving them life advice. He's their life coach. And he says, life is made successful by disciplined living, by focused living, by God-centered living. And to that end, one has to be willing to perform austerities. This is what differentiates the humankind from the animals. The animals don't perform austerities. They don't necessarily chant the names of the Lord. They don't restrict their diet. They're ready to fight with tooth and claw at the drop of a hat. They have to scrape and scramble to provide sleeping, eating, mating, defending in their lives. Only human beings are able to live a disciplined life, to renounce excessive food, excessive attachment to family life, and progress in spiritual life. Rishabdev does not tell his sons to remain single or celibate. He tells them that whether you're single or whether you're married, get up early, eat only food which is offered to Krishna, talk only about Krishna, and engage your family members in service, temple-related devotional service. Doesn't matter whether you're a householder or whether you're a celibate. The principle is to live a self-restrained, disciplined, focused life in Krishna consciousness. Vyavishatmaka buddhi eka kurunana bahushakaya buddhi avishavanam. So often the man will use the woman as an excuse. The woman says we have to do this, and the woman says we have to do this, and we can't spend money on the temple because we need to pay the soccer dues, or we can't donate for this festival project because we have to have a dental work done, and so on and so forth. But that's just the excuse that the man gives. If he would pick a Krishna conscious, a God conscious wife in the first place, then that tendency towards excess, the surfeit over and above the necessity of life, can be used in Krishna service. So often we hear, I can't donate because I have to put food on the table. I can't attend the temple because I'm too busy with my family. But how much time do we spend watching TV? How much time do we spend at the gym? How much time do we spend golfing? For that matter, how much time do we spend on the freeway going to and from work, where we're just listening to talk shows about Donald Trump and the war in Ukraine or in Israel, when we could be putting on nice, uplifting CDs or devotional programs? We waste so much time. And yet when it comes to attending the temple or donating to Krishna consciousness, we say, oh, I have no time, I have no money. We live in Mormon, Utah. One thing you may be aware is that to be a Mormon or in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in good standing, you have to donate 10% right off the top, before taxes, before anything. And you'd think people could ill afford, especially in this day and age, to donate 10% of their income to the church or to God-centered activities. And yet the fact is there are more millionaires in the Mormon church than in any other cross-section of the country. Why is that? You'd think there'd be less millionaires because they're giving 10% right off the top. But the point is that by giving 10% to God, and actually it's not that you make 100% and you give 10% to God. No, you give 100% to God and he gives 90% back. This is the idea of consecration. Because of that discipline, because of the necessity of budgeting and planning and prioritizing your expenses, even after giving 10%, the most affluent, wealthy cross-section of people in America are the Mormons. That 10% is not an expenditure, it's an investment, and it pays dividends. Pom samstriya mituni bab maitan tayo mitumridi atogri hachata janisho maham aham meti. The difference between an attached materialist, an attached householder, and a detached householder. The attached householder is called the Griha Medi. Griha Medi means who's envious of other households, has to have what others have, has to live in the kind of house that others live in, has to drive the kind of car that others drive. This envious householder prioritizes competitive, maximizes envy. It's envy which drives his spending, his budgeting, his apportioning of his time. On the other hand, the grihastra is one who takes only the minimum necessities of life. He drives a simple car. He lives in a house that's adequate for his means. He's happy. We talked last week about how a devotee is happy with 5 things. If Brent's listening, I quizzed him on this the other day, and he got 4 of them right away, and then he figured out the 5th one. One who is a devotee is satisfied with 5 things. Satisfied with his wife, satisfied with the food, satisfied with the income, satisfied with the home, and satisfied with the job. Now that same devotee can be not satiated by 3 things. One who is a devotee feels that one's never doing enough chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, never studying the scripture enough, and never giving enough in charity. In these 3 areas, a devotee always feels like he could give more chanting, more scripture, and more charity, like that. One may be satisfied with as much scripture and chanting and charity as one gives on any given day, but one always aspires to do more in the future, to go to a higher level. So engaging in household life or not engaging in household life is not the issue here. The issue is whether one is going to be overly attached. The issue is, are one's motives? Is one making this crucial, vital alliance with the fairer sex in order to increase one's Krishna consciousness? If the wife is a materialist and the husband is a materialist, and for that reason he chose a materialistic wife, then 1 minus 1 equals 0. That's the material law, right? That's material math. Because material life is a life of limits. So in material life, you take 1 and you subtract 1 and you have 0. So you have 1 man. He's capable of being Krishna conscious. He's capable of going back to home, back to Godhead. But he doesn't prioritize. He doesn't think it's that important. He thinks, I'll push that down on my to-do list, or I'll do that after my sex desire has abated and I've fulfilled my desire for family life. I'll do that in retired life. And so therefore he picks a non-Krishna conscious lady. So 1 minus 1 equals 0. Nothing is ever achieved during the course of such a lifetime. But if one is sincere enough and motivated enough to pursue Krishna consciousness always, every day of one's life, and not to waste time, not to put it off, then one will be very diligent about choosing one's wife. One will, at all costs, choose a Krishna conscious wife. So 1 potential Krishna conscious male married partnered with another Krishna conscious female is not 1 minus 1, because we're no longer subject to material laws, limitations, and conditions. One Krishna conscious male who does due diligence and partners with a Krishna conscious female is multiplication. 1 times 1 is 10. 1 times 1 is 100. 1 times 1 is 1,000. What could I have ever done on my own, Caru? Never mind. I won't get into all my shortcomings. What could I have ever done on my own? But when I partnered with Vaibhavi, it was multiplication. It wasn't subtraction, certainly. It wasn't 1 minus 1 equals 0. Neither was it 1 plus 1 equals 2. When they're both partners are Krishna conscious and there's that chemistry, it's 1 times 1 equals 100 equals 1,000. Who could have ever imagined the places that Krishna would have taken us to, the things that Krishna enabled us, empowered us to do, the doors that he opened. As Rishabh tells his son, he doesn't say get married or don't get married, but he says don't be attached to sense gratification. Don't be attached to the temporary family circle. Don't be envious of your neighbors. Don't let that drive you. Don't let that motivate you. Be God-centered. Seek the satisfaction of the Lord. Men don't promote you. Men don't give you favor. Men don't give you blessings. We don't work under men, but we work under God. So if you're a husband, do it in order to honor God. If you're a father, do it in such a way that you honor God. If you're an employee, do it in such a way that you honor God. If you're an employer, conduct yourself in such a way that God is honored. This way, you'll go through life being unaffected and unattached. And when the final test of death comes, you're ready. The pain of a devotee transitioning from this body to the next life is much, much less than the pain of a materialist person, because there's no resistance. This is the final exam for which we've done our homework, for which we've prepared. On the other hand, the more you're after prestige, the more you're motivated by envy, the more money you want, the more attached you are to your family, the more painful death is. Now think about the opening scene with Gajendra. Is he attached? Well, I think so. I think so. He's going, first of all, through the jungle, first, knocking aside the trees and bushes, taking the thorns. The thorns are scratching his own skin so that he can remove them from the path, and then following in his wake without any obstacles, without any scratching, without any impediments, come all the little kitties and all the wives. Then they come to the lake, and the wives don't want to go into the lake, and they don't want the kids to go in the lake because they know there's danger in there. There's crocodiles in there. Predators specifically hang out at water holes because they know that sooner or later, everyone needs to drink. So they don't have to dissipate their energy by traveling miles and miles and miles and miles. They just hang out at the water holes, and then they leap out, either leap down from a tree or they leap from the water. This is the easiest, most sensible way of feeding yourself. So the wives didn't want to enter the water. They didn't want the little children to enter the water. But Gajendra, in his intoxicated state of mind, thinking, this is my family. There's no higher duty I have than to maintain my family. And in the course of executing my duties as a husband and in the duties of a father, there's some sort of, this is my dharma. This is the purpose of life. And because I'm in the middle of the purpose of life, there will be protection afforded me. I cannot be touched. So risking his own life, not realizing it, being with fatal, lethal miscalculations due to intoxicants. You know, what happens when a man's intoxicated? What's the first thing he thinks about? He thinks he's invulnerable, he's indefeatable, he's indestructible, isn't it? A little guy comes up in a bar and challenges a big, strong karate expert to a fight. How could he do that? He's out of his mind. Well, he's drunk. Only drunk people do stuff like that. Only drunk people miscalculate the level of protection, the level of invulnerability, and the level of their own skills. So it just so happens that Gajendra is drunk. Not only is he drunk because he snorted honey with his trunk, but he's also just drunk on the eroticism, the euphoria of being looked up to by little elephant children and multiple wives, and being viewed as their savior, as their all in all. So he, unbeknownst to himself, though he's in a state of denial, he enters into the water and he turns back to where the children are lined up and the wives are lined up. They've been traveling for some time. They've gotten hot, they've gotten dusty, there's perspiration on their bodies, they're uncomfortable, they're thirsty, they're dehydrated. So standing alone in the water, Gajendra is sucking up the water with his trunk. First, he takes care of himself. He bathes himself and he drinks quantities of water so that he's no longer dehydrated. Just like they say in the airlines, if there's a drop in cabin pressure, an oxygen mask will come down. First, put the mask on yourself, then put it on your loved ones. You don't want to first put on your loved ones because you might pass out in the course of doing that. So you have to, first of all, take care, refresh, make sure you have oxygen. Then you will be capable and fit of giving oxygen to your seatmates. So Gajendra has at least enough good sense to bathe himself, get in water, take in moisture from all of his pores, drink water, bathe himself. Then he regains the full power, the full energy of which he's capable. And then he starts sucking up water with his trunk and giving a nice mist, giving a shower, a beautiful spray for the little baby elephants and for the wives, and so on and so on and so forth, and like that. So now the crocodile takes advantage of the situation. This is exactly what he's been waiting for. He counts on the fact that certain animals miscalculate their strength, miscalculate their influence, and that calculation translates into a meal for the crocodile. It's how he maintains himself, because certain animals are too dumb, too out of it to stay away, to observe a healthy distance, or at least to drink water carefully, and at least not to immerse themselves in the water. So he latches himself onto the elephant's leg. And at first, Gajendra's horrified. He's shocked. He did not expect this. This is the last thing. This is out of left field. This is the curved ball when you expected the fast ball. And his heart experiences a few expedited beats there. And he's focused on his leg. All of a sudden, there's a sharp, excruciating pain in his leg, and there's this incredible pressure pulling him away from the company of his wives and children. There's nothing he wants better than to be in amongst the family circle. And right now, he's being inevitably and inexorably, in spite of his strength on the land, he is at a disadvantage in the water, and he cannot help himself but that the crocodile is pulling him. In this tug of war, Gajendra realized he was losing the fight to stay upright, being dragged further from the shore, nagged by the reptile. His strength was flagging day by day. Lacking the backing of the other pachyderms, Gajendra was alone in this danger zone. The water had turned to foam. His friends had flown, and he had no one to phone. At the end of his fabled strength, devoid of his fabled strength, at the end of his rope's length, Gajendra's hopes turned to the Lord, awards protection to his devotees. He stopped pulling in his leg, which the croc wanted to devour, and plucked from the muck of the lake with his trunk a lotus flower, offered it, seeking the power of the Lord. Krishna, the root of creation, the fruit of the Vedas, the absolute truth, who plays on your flute, the ever-existing youth. Your lotus feet are adored by Lord Brahma and Shiva, who will not leave you even for a beat. Your features are unlimited. You're the ingredient of all creatures. Whether they have hands, claws, jaws, or paws, they're all your parts and parcels. Those who are smart engage in your devotional service with all their hearts and never depart from the hearth of your sheltering breast. Lord, I confess I've messed up, repressed my service, failed the test, but I'm thirsty for your mercy, which is greater than my mistakes. I've heard that all it takes to awaken your protection is a single cry of helpless affection. Therefore, in spite of my shame, I'm calling your name in the midst of the fight. Please reclaim me from the might of the crocodile's bite. Release me from the teeth of the croc, block ignorance in my life, lock me into devotional service. Let my purpose rise once again to the surface. Lord, I'm knocking at your door. Please keep me close from now until evermore. And when the Lord heard the eloquent prayers of the elephant, he steered Garuda to the spot, sheared the crocodile's head from its body with its chakra. When the reptile lay dead and Gajendra was shed of his dread, he resumed the thread of his prayers and said, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Now, the difference between Gajendra and the ordinary person at the time of death is that Gajendra was a great devotee in his last life. He was a king named Indradumaraj, and he was 99% Krishna conscious. Krishna says, Tatra Tambudi Samilabhata Yatato Chara Shamshiro Kurunandana. Whatever devotional service one has performed in a previous life will eventually rise to the surface. It may stay right with one, right into the womb of the next mother. One may be Krishna conscious even within the womb of one's mother, or one may be spoken to, such as Prahlad Maharaj was, in the womb of his mother by the Guru, and that may be reawakened within the womb. One, at the very least, Suchitam Srimatam Gehe Yoga Brashta Bijayate, will be led, attracted, like iron filings to a magnet. A soul, an advanced soul from a previous life, will, almost like magnetic files, be attracted into the womb of parents of a like disposition and will take one's next birth in an aristocratic or a Brahmin family. Or another scenario is that even though one, due to a curse or a so-called unfair situation, and we know everything is the plan of the Lord, there's an immediate cause and there's a remote cause. So the immediate cause of Indradyumna taking his next birth as an animal, in spite of the fact that he was an advanced devotee, the immediate cause is the curse of Agastya Muni, feeling slighted by Durvasa. But the remote cause is that the Lord is giving an assignment to his devotee, saying, you take your next birth in the species of elements. As an elephant, you appear to totally forget your Krishna consciousness of a previous life. You appear to be a materialistic person, envious of your neighbors, taken, prideful with your strength, and attached overly much to your family lives. However, I am going to reawaken your Krishna consciousness in a dramatic way. There's going to be a story surrounding the revival of your Krishna consciousness that people are going to sing about and compose poetry. They're going to recount your story for thousands of years throughout the ages, even coming down to Spanish for Utah. So this is the arrangement of the Lord. He had that background. Now, any amount of devotional service is to one's eternal credit. So with the provocation, with the heightened consciousness that comes from a life and death situation, Gajendra remembered not necessarily the specifics of his devotional life in a previous incarnation, but he just remembered that this is who I am. I'm not an elephant. I'm not this body. I'm not part of this family. I have nothing, in fact, to do with this material world. But I am Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhukata. I'm an eternal servant of Krishna. That's my constitutional position. It was repressed. It was forgotten. It was laid aside, apparently, by the arrangement of the Lord. But now it comes flooding to the surface. Bring my purpose once again to the surface, Gajendra prays. So now, at first, he was horrified at the prospect of death, being plucked out forcibly from amongst his family members. But now, with the revival, the reawakening, the reappearance of his Krishna consciousness, he's not at all resistant. He's not at all resistant when death comes knocking. Had he not that background of Krishna consciousness, were he not on a special assignment from the Lord, he would be totally freaked out. Totally freaked out. Yuktashu evam pramatasha katumba ashishara shivaika yopriya. In the case of Paranjana, Paranjana is an archetypical attached householder. And when it came time for him, his city of 9 gates, to be destroyed by time and old age, he freaked out. He totally lost it. His mind was all over the place. To talk about Halloween, there's no greater horror story than coming to the edge of the pit called death, not knowing what awaits you, realizing on a funda level, psychic level, that you've wasted the human form of life. You had a golden, unique, 1 in a million opportunity, and you spent it drinking beer, watching TV, and engage in sex life, totally to the exclusion of Krishna consciousness. Human life is a unique opportunity to overcome the cycle of rebirth, which no one survives. Time to realize your eternal state and attain the spiritual world one day. This is the meaning of human sense. If I'm eternal, why all the external posturing or pretense? My time is better spent overcoming rebirth and rising high into the spiritual sky. So ultimately, what's the difference between a Grihamaiti and a Grihastra, an envious householder and a God-centered householder? The God-centered householder makes the transition from one life to another easily, without any resistance whatsoever. It's what he or she has been preparing for. It's the final exam. Ante kale chamaveva, shmaran mukpa kaleva. We can just remember Krishna at the time of death. Krishna comes and takes us with him on Garuda, back to home, back to God. Otherwise, we spend our middle age in anxiety and depression. We feel feelings of guilt, having omitted to execute the prime duty for which we come into this human form of a life. We feel anxiety, hypertension. And pathetically, we try to hold on to the keys to the house, the keys to the car, the keys to the family, with our increasingly arthritic, rheumatic, vein, liver-spotted hands. And we hope against hope to remain here in the circle of family and friends. There was a young girl who brought her friend home. In that home, not only did she live with her parents, but her grandfather also had a room in the house. He'd lost his wife, and so he'd come to live with his daughter and son-in-law. So the little girl, they were making sandwiches in the kitchen, and Grandpa was also there. And so just to be polite, generally kids don't much care for older people, but just to be polite, she introduced, she said, "Grandpa, this is my friend Sarah." And then she said to Sarah, "This is my grandpa. He's in his 90s. And Grandpa is said to have said, early 90s. Early 90s. Prabhupada told the story of Akbar. Akbar had Hindu Krishna conscious Vaishnava counselors, to his credit. So he asked one of the counselors a philosophical question. He said, how long does this attachment for sex life last? How long is one a materialistic, envious person feel the fires, the appetite for association with the opposite sex? And the minister said, it's a fire that if you add fuel to it, it never abates. You may reach that stage of life where you're not able to act upon, you're not able to perform in your lusty desires, but the desires themselves are probably burning higher and brighter and hotter in old age, even than they did in youth, because you've indulged them. You flocked, you fed the fire throughout the entire lifetime. So even though you physically may not be able to perform, the desire, the inner fire probably burns higher and hotter than ever before the older you get. What more pathetic situation can you imagine? And Akbar wasn't prepared to believe this. He thought, surely wisdom comes with old age. Surely as the body becomes less and less capable of performing in connection to the opposite sex, surely the desire itself dissipates as well. A few days later, the minister didn't say anything at that time, but a few days later, he signaled to the king, you remember that conversation we had? Well, I'll make my point. Just follow me. Don't say anything. The king followed the minister wordlessly throughout the city, this winding streets of Old Delhi. They came before a house, and due to the markings on the door of the house, they could understand that there's an old man dying inside. So the minister said, when we go into the deathbed, into the chambers of this old man, I forgot the most important part. The minister told Akbar, bring your teenage daughter with you. So it was not just Akbar, but it was his attractive 16-year-old daughter. The two of them followed the minister to the doorway, from the markings of which they could understand there's a man in the last throes of life inside. And the minister then said, watch the man's eyes. He can no longer speak, but watch his eyes to see where his eyes go when you walk in the door. So the king walked into the door, dying man's door, side by side with his daughter. Now, this is Akbar. He's king of the known world. He's got presence. He's used to people bowing down and deferring to him. He's used to having sovereignty and sway over everybody he meets. And he's got all the trappings of royalty, jewels and scepter and crown, and he's got presence. And then there's this little 16-year-old girl, 2468, who do we appreciate? Compared to the king, fluff. The eyes of the old man, he literally had seconds to live, parched, withered, racked with pain, unbelievably ugly, pale, shriveled, shrunken, smells bad. His eyes, like a laser, went not to the king, but to the little girl. And then he died. So once they got back into the palace, Akbar gave the wise man a nice bonus and said, yes, you're right. If you fuel the flames, Yayati had switched his decrepit old age with youth with his youngest son, Puru, and getting a second lease on life, getting an extra 1,000 years of youth. Yayati enjoyed with his many wives. But at the end, he said, Asevitam Varshagamam Sadbhagam Shananim. He said, after 1,000 years added on to my youth, 1,000 years of enjoying with multiple wives and concerts and courtesans, the desire is stronger than ever. It burns brighter and hotter than it's ever before. Therefore, you cannot come to the end of desires by satisfying desires. You have to clamp down on it. You have to draw a line in the sand. You have to exhibit discipline. If you do not exercise discipline, then you will have to experience regret and madness at the end of life. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It's all the time that we have this morning. Thank you, one and all. And thanks to all the Krishna conscious ladies out there. We men are grateful. You are our life rafts. You are our saviors. I hope you're listening, Bye Bobby. Yes, he's listening. 3 flowers she put there. John Malik is listening. He has a wonderful wife as well. Brent Spencer, thanks for joining us. Carmen, happy Monday. And Kartik, yes, this is the beginning of the Kartik season. We sang the Dhammadarastakam prayers and offered lamps last Saturday night at the Krishna temple. We continue doing so. And then, of course, Diwali is right around the corner, November 11th. We'll celebrate Saturday night at Salt Lake City with fireworks, with folk dancing, with the lighting of lamps, circumambulating of Govardhan Hill, lots and lots of kirtan, good friendship, good sangha, and last but not least, lots and lots of prasadam. Everybody's encouraged to cook something at home without onions and garlic, bring it to the temple, enough for maybe 5 or 6 people, and hopefully we'll have 108 different preparations. We'll have a mountain of prasadam, mountain of food for the Lord to consume in his form as Govardhan. Here's some poetry from Carmen. Life is tough. Oops. Life is tough. You're not enough. Being alone in Maya is rough. To avoid this fate, find a mate whose chastity brings blessings great. I love that. What do you think, Rob?
That's a good one.
I know you're not on Facebook, so I'll read it to you once more, okay? Life is tough. You're not enough. Being alone in Maya is rough. To avoid this fate, find a mate whose chastity brings blessings great. Dedicated to all the Krishna conscious women out there. Sundari Priya, Amrita Sundi, Shwati, Vaibhavi, so many other great Krishna conscious devotees. And in history, we've got Draupadi, we've got Gandhari, we've got Kunti, and so many women leading the charge back to home, back to God. All right, those are our Facebook people. In addition to which we have Atma Tatpadas listening all the way from South Africa. Awesome. Rob, what verses do you have to add to our compendium here this morning?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Thank you for this class as always. All right. Too much attachment to kids and wives means we will repeat our lives.
Isn't it interesting how poetry just kind of like, I don't know, just drives the point home so much more thoroughly.
You have to really trim the fat and get it down to its essence.
I tell people poetry are the best sentiments, the best, best sentiments expressed in the best vocabulary by the best people. So no wonder, poetry is so alluring. Please continue.
Once off track, it's hard to get back. Relationships should bring you up, not cause you to corrupt.
Yeah, there you go.
There's always an excuse when devotion is a ruse.
There's always an excuse when devotion is a ruse. Whoa, that's a good cut. The shoe fits, put it on.
Is your relationship an alliance, reliance, or defiance?
Excellent.
Krishna brings our purpose to the surface.
Yep. Sooner or later.
And when you feel desire, or when you feed desire, it puts fuel on the fire, making it burn higher and higher.
Nice. Krishna brings your purpose to the surface. It's interesting that such a long period of time passed. Elephants live for 100 years. And don't forget, Gajendra was on the heavenly planets. So on the heavenly planets, our 6 months is 1 day. Gajendra was a mature elephant on the heavenly planet. So he must have been, by our calculations, tens of thousands of years old. And in all that time, he hadn't exhibited a shred of Krishna consciousness. And yet it was there latent. And Krishna wanted to show that it's never lost. It's always there. It may appear sooner or it may appear later. It certainly appeared later, much, much later in the case of Gajendra. But even though we may forget about Krishna, Krishna never forgets about us. And Gajendra's apparent forgetfulness, apparent immersion in ignorance was really only a part of the plan of the Lord. And this plan extended over tens of thousands of years. So our memories might be short, but Krishna's memory is forever. So we can always trust on, rely upon, and count on Krishna. Every time we chant, every time we offer prasadam, every time we go to the temple, every dollar we give, Krishna remembers it and he never forgets it. And sooner or later, the rewards will be there. I don't know about you guys, but I'm pumped up this morning. Thank you. Please send those to me, and we'll be back with more thoughts in this connection tomorrow and Transcendental Tuesday. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare.